Hi guys, just before we get into today's episode, I just wanted to ask you a big favor. Assuming you like the content that I'm putting out on this channel, could you please do me a favor and press the subscribe button? It really does help reach more people. And while you're at it, if you could just smash that like button down there, we'd really appreciate it. I just want to get this channel out to as many people as possible, so more and more people are getting exposed to these kinds of stories. And I'll stop talking now and let you get into the episode. Welcome to another episode of the Chronic Comeback podcast. Today, I am really excited to have on the show Dr. Jessica Peatross, aka Dr. Jess MD, on Instagram. And if you are on Instagram and you are in this community, then it would be almost impossible to not have come across Dr. Jess. Her Instagram specifically is a constant source of knowledge and information, but also inspiration and hope for us all going through our chronic illness journey. I'm so excited to have her on the show because she has the unique perspective of having come from a traditional medical background to now becoming one of the most sought after functional medicine leaders. Her passion lies in really uncovering the mystery behind chronic illness, whether that be stealth infections, heavy metals, stress, trauma, or other environmental toxicities. I know this podcast is normally to interview people who've made amazing recoveries and comebacks, but I feel like it's just as, if not more, valuable to have episodes like this where we're able to hear from someone like Jess, who plays such a major role in so many people's recoveries, and just to add to all of your increasing faith and belief. And we'll get into that in your own recovery. So I'm super grateful, Jess, that you've managed to spare the time for this interview. And thank you so much for coming on.
Of course, I'm honored. What a lovely introduction. Thanks so much, Phil.
Cool. Right. Well, then, if you could really just take us back to, I guess, when you were more of how you got into medicine, and then really, a lot of people and, a lot of guests on this show will attest to this, that the medical doctors, they will just stick in their lane normally and they'll stay on that side and they won't normally look to venture over to the other side. Could you talk us through how that came about and, that initial part of the story?
Yeah, when I finished medical school and residency, the next step for me was hospitalist work, which is basically admitting and discharging patients and consulting specialists as needed. And I did that for a long time. I did that for almost 7 years before it really started to tug at my heartstrings. And I started to notice things they were feeding people in the hospital, certain Coca-Cola contracts they had, certain ways they kind of did business more so than have concern about the welfare of the patients. It was just an energy I started to notice over time, and one that obviously didn't align with where I wanted to go. And so I have a hard time staying in things when I see a different perspective. And so that was sort of my journey. Was after I realized that, it took me a couple of years to get out of hospitalist work and figure out what I really wanted to do, which I knew was still help people, but I really didn't know. I wasn't trained in things like, functional medicine or nutrition really, or any of that stuff. So it was up to me to self-teach and self-train and go through different certification programs to learn what I wanted to learn and feel comfortable in the space. And so it was a slow burn, I guess, if you will.
Mm-hmm. And because you must have, I know college and stuff in America is not cheap anyway. And when you've been through all of that training to then suddenly think you wanted to do something else, that's quite a bit of a leap of faith that that's the right decision for you, right?
Yeah. And, my personality type is one that I don't mind change anyway. I wouldn't say I seek it out now, but maybe when I was younger, I did. But now I don't mind change. It doesn't scare me. It doesn't threaten me. I see it more as an adventure or a challenge. And so, it's sort of in my personality to not be threatened by something like that either. And I was lucky in that, although I had paid all this for my education, I didn't have, I wasn't married. I didn't have kids. And so I had the opportunity to kind of bounce when I saw something that didn't align with me over time. I just really had to figure myself out and get to know myself better, because if you don't know what you love or what gives you joy or where you're headed, then the universe will just kind of move you around like a leaf in the wind. So it
Mm,
took me a minute to kind of get my grounding and get to know myself a little bit better, to see where I wanted to go and how I wanted to practice and how I wanted to help people.
mm.
Yeah.
In terms of chronic illness, when did you first start? I mean, is this something that you, because for me, until I'd actually started experiencing it myself, I guess I didn't really understand what it was. For me, if you got sick, you went to the doctor, you got a pill, or they gave you something, and you either got better or you didn't. In a So
Yeah.
when did you were you exposed to it at a younger age, or is it something when you were actually in medicine?
No, I did not have never been ill myself. I mean, the most injured I've been was in a car accident when I was 17 and broke my back. And that was really where I was inspired a lot by my very, very sweet and humble neurosurgeon that I had at the time. But really, other than that, I've never been physically ill or had any problems like that. So I really started to just see how through the hospitals that they were kind of not being honest about food and nutrition and about some of the omega-6 soybean oil that's in some of the things they keep people sleep with on the ventilator. I just started to notice things like that. And
Mm,
then I started to say, what else are they hiding? And so that was sort of my slow trickle into how I opened up to it,
mm,
right? It was, what else are people hiding? um, what else does the other side have to say that I wasn't told about? And
mm,
so that was the difference with me, I think,
yeah.
was just being open to other people's perspectives and the way that I had maybe not treated patients in such a great way because I had believed in the system and in what it was telling me, rather than listening to patient side of things and maybe opening my mind into maybe that their perspective and their perspective on their body was correct.
Mm,
And just because I hadn't experienced it, maybe I should look at what they're saying, and instead of blaming them, blame the system, which I had already seen be a little wrong about the way it was treating people in the hospital in acute situations. And so that's what made me start to kind of see a new perspective and hear and listen to patients and believe them, was
mm,
because I started to see the other side lying. So I guess luckily, I didn't have to be taught by being sick this time,
mm.
because I listened before, I think.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. Sorry, when I said when were you exposed to it in terms of like coming across patients, because I think something you said then is just you believed them. And if there's one thing you can actually do to, for a patient, even if you don't do anything else, if you believe them, I feel like that's just such an amazing thing.
Yeah, Phil, I don't know how to put it into words. There's this, if you're someone who understands energy, you might understand what I'm saying a little bit
Yeah.
more here.
Yeah.
There's a certain like tentacles of energy that are taught in school, in medical school and residency. They would never say, don't listen to the patient. They would never say that. But then they give you 6 to 8 minute slots to talk to a patient. So that infers that you don't really listen to a patient. And
Yeah.
then they there's certain subtle energy they teach us, just to that the system knows better.
Hmm.
And that you know if patients come in with chronic fatigue or fibromyalgia, because we can't find anything on a blood test,
Hmm.
that the patient, there's psych issues. And they say it matter of fact and scientific like that, but the underlying energy with that is that infers that the patient is not mentally stable.
Mm.
And that infers that when someone is mentally unstable, there's a stigma that we don't believe them or respect what they're saying about their bodies. And that's the underlying current.
Yeah. Do you think that for someone who's listening to this right now, who's maybe like myself and a lot of people that have been through this journey, who are finding it difficult to get someone who does seem like they believe them and is on their level, would you say that's the very first thing they need to do? They need someone who's actually kind of on their side and actually believes what they're going through.
Yeah, because it's sort of like, if someone completely denies your reality all the time, that is gaslighting. That is, after a while, you do start to question your sanity. You do start to question what your body is telling you, and you start to distrust your own vessel. And
Mhm.
so that's really important. It's really hard to heal if you don't trust the physical body you're in. And if
Mhm.
someone is not helping you to trust your body, then it's not probably a good fit.
And so moving on to when you've gone into the functional medicine world, I've seen that you focus on a whole wide range of issues. Would you say there's one particular areas in which you specialize in, or do you? Because what I'm coming to more of the realization is at the moment that I could speak to someone who's got chronic fatigue as a label, and I've got Lyme disease as a label, and yet we're probably suffering with the exact same thing. It's just people have given us different labels. What's your view on that? But also, which areas do you actually focus on?
So, I started out in internal medicine, and that's more of a broad specialty that you can launch into a bunch of different fellowships like cardiology, nephrology, things like that in standard allopathic medicine. Now, with my functional training, I really head more towards the biotoxin illness, mold, Lyme, environmental toxicity, mystery patient, because I like to get to the root cause of people's mystery symptoms for them. And oftentimes I've come to find that that is something more common than we have allowed our brains to wrap themselves around, which is Lyme or mold, due to modern day housing or modern day society or whatever it is, right? Whatever is causing this. As far as the medical label goes, or what allopathic medicine will call ICD-10 codes, I really think that is a problem, because people kind of identify with the label. And, when someone diagnoses you, they say, oh man, you have Lyme disease, you have cancer, whatever it is. That's like a dagger right in our heart, or an arrow, a dagger right in our heart when we hear that. And it's reeling from that label for quite some time. But it's a little bit softer if you can say to people, you have a constellation of symptoms, and those your body's expressing those because it's screaming that something is wrong. It's always trying to help you. And so most of the time, if we can catch that early, we can help people in some way, or help to put things in remission, or hopefully reverse things. But it has to be caught early. And when there's those warning signs, I also feel like a lot of labels people have are their body reacting to being poisoned.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
When you say catching something early, though, because obviously a lot of people, including myself, won't, because it's chronic. It's been going on for quite a long time, and a lot of people who have been on this show have had stuff for a long time, and then when they finally figure out the key thing for them, it actually is a relatively shorter period of time for them to recover. Is it always? Is that, do you have to catch something early, or are you able to still
it
work with people?
it depends. It depends on the condition. For Lyme and mold, those are reversible things. But sometimes if you catch cancer in stage 4 or ALS, it's not reversible at that
Yes.
point. Things
Yeah.
are too far gone. The body has been in out of homeostasis for too long.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. I guess I was referring more to, Lyme, mold, that side of biotoxin illness. And I guess more of a selfish question, really, because that's, essentially what I've been diagnosed with, like a biotoxin illness. But I think pretty much 99% of people who will be listening to this will have so many toxins in their body, it's relevant to them. We're living in such a toxic world at the moment. Why is it that someone like me or people listening to this will suffer badly, and then someone who's living and sitting right next to them is totally fine and able to get away with it?
Like me? Yeah. So I think that we have different genotypes, which are the way our bodies express certain little proteins on our white blood cells that recognize pathogens, or certain nucleic sequences from pathogens or toxicities. If we have a genotype that doesn't recognize things as well, then we may be in a little more trouble, because the world has gotten so much more toxic. If we have a genotype that recognizes these things really well, we may not have symptoms. However, both people, if they're, let's say, exposed to a water damaged home, it's not good for anyone. So basically, just to summarize, is people are so bioidentical and different. And these people who are sensitive don't say, oh, I've been cursed for life. Don't think that. Really, everything that is toxic around us is bad for all human bodies. And you guys are the canaries in the coal mine that help warn people like me who don't feel anything. One day I may just end up with, cancer or a blood sugar issue and would never be wiser because my body didn't give me, or I didn't pick up on the subtle clues that maybe you would.
Yeah, that's such that's such a great point, because I know I've talked about this on a number of episodes where if you're trying to look at this in a positive way, which you've got to try and do that, we're actually quite lucky because our body's telling us to consider things like now, potentially, earlier on in our lives, rather than, those people who do just accumulate a lot of toxins throughout their life. And then kind of when they get to the point where they're too old to change their ways and maybe a bit stuck in their ways, it's a lot more difficult for them to do that. And so, yeah, I think that's an amazing point. And yeah, definitely should feel a little bit lucky in a way.
Come on. Yeah. I know it doesn't feel good to be sick or feel bad, but there's a reason. That's how smart your body is.
Do you think there's so I've looked into like Joe Dispenza and a lot of work with it in terms of like the ability to your body to like switch on and switch off certain genes, and when people get sick, it's because their body, is so overloaded and certain genes switch on that hadn't been switched on before. Do you believe that you can switch off these genes and that will aid your recovery?
I do. That's the good news that I feel like we weren't told about necessarily was, we talk about all these genetic polymorphisms and SNPs, we call them, that are bad, 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 MTHFR and COMT and all these horrible SNPs, right? That are just going to ruin your life and there's no return from the ninth ring of hell. And it's not exactly true. The good news with all of this, and I find it weird that people oddly sometimes want to still have the doomsday news, but the good news, the truth about all this is that you can actually turn genes off and on, which bodes well for us too. And so if you remove exposures, you avoid toxic substances, you become a little bit more aware of your local environment and maybe the environment in general, then we're able to really turn around a lot of those polymorphisms that are seen as negative.
Yeah. And do you believe that it's chronic illness is more of a, because when people seem to list all of these, I mean, I even did it with you when I was describing what I've got going on, Lyme, parasites, I'm listing all of these things. And I feel like that causes some people, particularly, me previously, to get overwhelmed because I'm like, I've got all of these things going on. But actually, if you look at it as it's more of a systemic issue, that once you get that sorted out, it should sort everything out. Is that the way you think about it?
Yes, like you described a minute ago, you said it's like a switch is flipped, and it's almost like that in the body. It's sort of on tilt all the time. It's always waiting for the next shoe to drop. It's in flight or fight. It's stuck in a chronic unchecked inflammation position, right? There are all these things they're talking about a similar process where the body's out of normalcy. So we, as functional medicine doctors or practitioners, really try our best to clean that system up and figure out where is the switch, where is the on button, and what's keeping it pressed. Because there's usually some sort of exposure or thought process or toxicity in the body that is causing that not to be able to be reversed right away for the person. And they're just sensitive and their body's overloaded.
Mm-hmm. And when people talk about toxicity, I'd say 95% of the population, maybe more, think of just all of these external sources, whereas the biggest source of toxicity, or one of the biggest sources of toxicity, could be your own thoughts and your mindset. How much of a big role does mindset, do you think, play in recovery and just chronic illness in general?
I think it's huge, honestly. I think, there can be a lot of different reasons people have a poor or negative mindset. It can be trauma, it can be toxins, it can be habits, it can be, lots of different things. This is a very multifactorial process, but absolutely, if you don't believe in your body, you distrust yourself and your body, and you don't really think, or deep down, you're not really sure you can do it, or your body is right, or has the ability to heal, it likely will impact that journey for you.
Mm. And so do you, because I think people will probably start to get a bit fed up of me constantly having people on the show who talk about brain retraining, but it just seems to be so many of the recovery stories right now involve brain retraining, and it's quite comforting for me because I haven't been through that yet, and I'm going to, and so I feel like it's a big, and it makes so much sense to me now. Is it part of, when you work with people, is that normally part of your treatment program that you would have someone do?
No, well, yes, actually it would be. I don't really think everyone needs it, but the majority of people who are sick will. You can kind of tell if you spend an hour and a half talking to someone, if they're on tilt, if they're having spiraling thoughts, if they're not grounded, if they're stuck in flight or fight, or they don't feel safe and secure, that they belong in the world. That definitely will impact someone's healing. I can't really heal people from a place of flight or fight. And so sometimes people will appear grounded, but they talk about how much they get done. And, you can notice that they're not comfortable just being in their thoughts or possibly with their body. They always have to be doing something. And that is something that can hinder someone's healing if they're not balanced in between rest and digest and flight or fight.
And in terms of brain retraining or that side of things, are there any particular programs that you normally recommend to people?
Yeah, I really like dynamic neural retraining system, or DNRS, which I think is really affordable for people. You have to kind of understand yourself a little bit. There are certain programs you can pay for that will do a lot of work for you. And there are other programs that are super affordable, but they require you to be proactive. And if that's just not you, you may have a problem with something like DNRS. It requires a very, very proactive, very disciplined, and person who wants to heal, who doesn't have a lot of roadblocks. If you have roadblocks, I really like things like EMDR. That's really useful with a guided practitioner. I really like emotion code or tapping, freedom technique. I think there's a lot of good programs that are coming out. I really like the AMP coil. I have one. I use a lot of energy medicine and frequencies to heal people too.
Okay. Sorry, what's that last thing you said?
The AMP coil is a not cheap alternative. It's a PEMF, bioresonance and sound technology Tesla coil that helps create, there's different programs on an Android for the brain or parasympathetic system or different drainage pathways. And so it's something that immediately when I used, it's like hitting an easy button. That's one of the things that you can just lay there and take the treatment. It helps put you immediately in rest and digest. But not everyone has financial means for these things. So I like to give free things or very affordable things for people too. Really working on the vagus nerve is important for people who are sick. And that there's some free things you can do for that too, not necessarily brain programs, but cold plunges or humming, singing, dancing, meditation, breath work. Even enemas can help tag the vagus nerve and calm people down some. So if you can't afford some of these programs, you can start slow and work your way up too. I mean, what do you like, Phil? What have you used?
In terms of like brain retraining or meditation, and so I started trying. So I've done like a lot of like Joe Dispenza stuff, and I've been on one of his like advanced retreats. I think he's amazing. I love the fact that it's science based, and it's like almost no denying that you can't. It's there. He's done studies on it. So I love that. I tried to do the gut program. I tried starting it. I didn't. if I'm honest, I've said it a few times on the show, his voice annoys me a little bit. So I found it quite difficult. So I actually had someone on the show who went through DNRS and created her own program, Lindsay Mitchell, Vital Side. So I'm going to do her program, but I'm moving to Bali in January.
Nice.
So I've decided that I'm gonna have so much more time there, so I'm gonna start that all there. And they have a lot of like wellness spas and stuff there where you do cold plunges and infrared saunas, and it's just hyperbaric oxygen therapy. It's so well set up for people with chronic illness.
Amazing.
So
Make sure you go to Yoga Barn in Ubud.
Yeah, I've heard of that. I've heard. Have you been to Bali before? I'm assuming you have been to Bali then.
Yeah, a couple times. Yeah, I love Bali. It's great. But mostly just Ubud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just, I guess, just going back into it in terms of like for someone listening to this right now who is completely overwhelmed and they don't know which way to turn next, they have so many symptoms, no answer from the doctors. What would you suggest as their next step?
So, first of all, try to get over the labels that they've given you, because it's really just a constellation of symptoms where your body's freaking out. And know that a lot of this can be reversible with the right recipe. But, the first step, honestly, is becoming a little more positive and opening up to things you haven't tried. And if you do have medical PTSD, then, address that. Be honest with yourself, and maybe work on getting over things and working on retraining the brain first and foremost, if you know that about yourself. Secondly, I would make sure that you're not living in a water damaged house and that your local environment is as clean as you can possibly afford or muster. That's really important. Getting an ERMI test on the house, an air quality test, is really important too, to look just to make sure, because some people really can't heal from a place of flight or fight or a place where there's water damage or toxins in their home, for sure. Secondly, I would say people really need to work on opening their drainage pathways. So this is something that can take a few months if people are very, very sensitive and they are sensitive to taking medications too. It can be a double whammy, but work on really going slow and learning how to sweat, walking in the sunlight, work on prioritizing your sleep, and getting as much sleep as you can. Work on your fatigue the next day by maybe mitochondrial supplements and walking in the sunshine and meditation in the morning. All of these things can be free and aren't supplemental based, and I think should be done before you get on a supplement of green pharmacy, which is really annoying to me. So if you're trying to spot treat every single lab that's abnormal, that's the same thing that allopathic medicine does. We really want to tailor a regimen after you've opened your drainage pathways, after you've worked on pooping and your liver works okay and you can sweat okay and you have pretty good energy because you're sleeping maybe a little bit better. Things don't have to be perfect. Then you need a good practitioner to possibly guide you through pulling out things in the body that don't belong there, like mold spores or Lyme spirochetes, or things like that. You really want to make sure the body is more in balance before you go do something like that, though.
That's really interesting. I've not heard that before. Doing the free things, which is nice, and doing the things that you should be doing anyway, like sleep, which a lot of people ignore, before actually spending the money on loads of supplements. That's really interesting.
Yeah. And you can, if you're lucky enough to be able to have the energy to move your body, that's a great way to sweat. You don't necessarily have to have an expensive sauna. If you can't move your body very well and sweat that way, you can get in a hot Epsom salt bath and drink some ginger tea beforehand, because it's really important that your body performs processes like it was made to, like sweat when you're hot, go to the bathroom 1 to 3 times per day, sleeping normally and feeling restored in the morning. If you're not doing these things, no supplement is really it may help, but these are things that need to be adjusted. And if you're trying these things, they're not working, there's maybe an exposure we need to look for in your teeth, in your house, something in your body that doesn't belong there, that's really spinning your processes out of whack. And that's really important to do that before we go killing things, right?
Well, yeah, and do you think then, before anyone goes on a supplement regime, they should see some improvement first from doing the initial steps that you talked about?
Yeah, not everyone is the same, so I can't lump everyone in the same bucket together. But for the most part, people have a much more pleasurable experience with detoxing if that's done for them beforehand.
Mm,
Uh, there are some people that you're just not going to be able to prep them properly if they're living in mold. Their bodies will not open up, they will continually have blocked pathways. And there's some people who really don't need to be prepped as much. They can jump right into a cleanse, although I think these people are more rare.
mm. Do you think it's possible for someone to recover, although it might take longer, without supplements at all if they're doing all of the other things?
Yeah, I've actually watched someone do that. Now, I wouldn't say she didn't take any supplements, but she didn't stick to a hardcore regimen forever and ever. And she took things regularly, that like daily vitamins, I would
Mm,
say. But this girl really had POTS, had a lot of anxiety, depression issues. And she really healed herself by traveling and staying places that were warm and tropical in the sunshine, and
mhm,
grounding. And really it was sunshine and grounding. And so, and she changed her diet up to a lot of organ meat and grass-fed meat and very little carbs and sugar. And I think that was great for her too. And so this person kind of came in to herself and realized what she needed to heal her body, and that's what she did. And it wasn't everyone's recipe, but
mm,
really I think for most people, shunning modern society and toxic society is a big part of this, and
mm,
really returning to the way that nature and God had intended humans to live,
mm.
because everything is provided here for us already, and we've been kind of mocking it and making things for our own financial purposes. And so really, as we heal earth, we heal ourselves. And so really, some of my prescriptions for some people are just going out on a camping trip for 2 weeks.
I love that. Yeah, it's just simplifying it a lot more as well. Yeah, that's amazing. It just quickly, just talking. I want to talk a little bit about belief. And we touched upon it before we started recording. How important is belief in your own recovery, and how much do you emphasize that when you're first dealing with someone?
I try really hard. It's like a subtle energy I use now when I talk to someone on a consult. Like I'll do it, on the consult I have next. So I watch how someone speaks, I watch how they breathe, I watch their perspective on things and how they talk about their life. And if I notice that there's a gray cloud over them, that they have very negative spiraling thoughts, that they have pressured speech, that they just don't seem comfortable in their own skin or in their own life, then at some point I try to kindly bring that up to them, because sometimes it's an awareness that you don't see about yourself.
Mm,
And sometimes people don't even realize that the energy of the home they grew up in is what they inherited, and that was a very negative energy maybe. And so that's really hard to change. I think mindset is harder than just about anything to change. And if there is a improper mindset in a chronically ill person, it has to be addressed early and soon, because it takes so long to change. You
mm,
can think about how long it takes you to change, and then you can think about how long it takes to change someone else. It's
yeah.
almost impossible sometimes.
Mm,
And especially, everyone's different. Some people are really open to hearing about things like that, and other people are closed off, and you are not going to be able to get to them. And so it takes a very skilled practitioner to be able to know when things like that can be broached and when they can't.
definitely. And they've got to want to change as well. I think if you'd have met me 6, 7 years ago, you'd have never heard me talking about energy and Joe Dispenza and stuff like that. And yet now I'm like so open to all of those things. And I'm open and excited about it beyond recovery. I want a new level of health. I don't just want to got what I lost. I want more than that, which I think is an amazing target to have. It's really nice to hear you as a doctor to talk about energy. I think it's a really cool thing to information to share with the patient. And you're not this yogi sitting in a forest. You're talking about energy. You're actually someone who's in medicine and functional medicine and talking about that. So I think that's really cool.
Absolutely. And now look at you, you're moving to Bali.
Yeah, exactly.
You in the most energetic, healing, esoteric place there is on the planet, almost, honestly.
Oh,
So
amazing. Just, just finally, with someone who's listening to this right now, who's in the, they can't see a way out. They're really in the depths of chronic illness, and they actually don't believe in their own recovery. What would you say to someone going through that right now? Not in terms of actual steps to take, because I know you've already gone through that, but just in terms of their mindset.
I would say, don't think that you're going to do everything overnight. It's a very slow process. So you have to be easy on yourself, like you would be easy on a child. And sometimes the inner voice we have with ourselves is the voice that was used on us as children. And you may be trying to get away from that. So it's very hard to stop yourself and what you say to yourself. So I want you to pretend like, you're a small child, or it may be even helpful to get in this quiet place and go open a door and see where your inner child is in that bedroom as an adult. Well, does your inner child come and run up and hug you, or are they afraid of you and they're crying? And if it's the latter, that's really important. I know it sounds kind of, silly or cliche for me to be talking about an inner child, but you do have a little inner child in you that never grew up and is still wounded from things that you may have experienced growing up. And that's a lot of people's trauma. And so really getting to know that little kid inside of you and what gives them joy and what frightens them is very important for healing that mindset that you may have as an adult that may have shaped your belief patterns and your thoughts. And I would say go very slow, find time to get into a peaceful, still place, be easy on yourself like you would a child who's learning. Maybe you get up every morning and instead of getting on social media and getting so mad about the world, you journal and you get to know yourself a little bit better. Maybe you do a breathwork class. All of these things are extremely important for changing your thoughts slowly and be easy, be gentle.
Yeah. Thank you so much for all of that great answer, and then just for coming on the show and dealing with my technical faults. Hopefully they've all been edited out by this point, so it's fine. If people want to connect with you, how would it be? How would best to do that?
Sure. Yeah. So there's different hierarchies and levels of the ways to do this. If you like free information, I give a lot of it on Instagram under Dr. Jess MD. If you would like more information that's higher level, where I answer you personally on the forum, or you can come ask questions in live webinars with me. That's my Wellness Plus app on my website. It's app.drjessmd.com. And then I have my regular website, Dr. Jess MD, if you like to read blogs that are informational. So I try to provide different levels of information and vibing out with you guys, if you will.
Awesome. I think you're going to have a number of people following you and contacting you on your website. So thank you so much for coming on. I know you've got to rush off to another consultation now. Thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Phil, thanks for having me. No, it was great. I look forward to the podcast coming out. So thanks so much.